Today's symposium concerns, can foreigners buy real estate in Singapore? Hello friends, this is Sanjay Arora. By profession I am an advocate. I welcome all of you to my YouTube channel Legally Determined. The first relevant question pertaining to today's agenda, can foreigners buy real estate in Singapore? The first relevant question is, what are the functions of the HDB of Singapore? The HDB, the Housing and Development Board of Singapore, is the government housing agency in Singapore that provides government funded flats for 99 years lease agreements. People who have stayed in these flats can resell these flats after they have completed their MOP, minimum occupation period, that is 5 years. However, the price of resale is not monitored by the Singapore government. Foreigners are not allowed to purchase public housing built by the HDB, Housing and Development Board of Singapore. In Singapore, foreigners have to acquire prior approval from the Singapore Land Authority. In short, it is known as SLA. If they wish to purchase landed residential property or residential land for development. Post December 2011, an additional effective 10% tax or ABSD, additional buyer's stamp duty, is levied on foreigners who purchase homes in Singapore. US nationals are treated as Singaporean nationals under the Free Trade Agreement, meaning thereby that they pay 12 to 15% ABSD, additional buyer stamp duty, only on second or subsequent purchases of residential properties. The HDB, the Housing and Development Board of Singapore, was set up on 1st Feb 1960 during the housing crisis in Singapore. The HDB was tasked with providing sanitary living conditions to replace the prevalent unhygienic slums and crowded squatters settlement. More than 1 million flats have been completed in 23 towns and 3 states across Singapore. HDB flats spell home for 80% of Singapore's resident population, of which about 19% own their homes. HDB flats are one of the most recognized aspects of Singapore living. The second question is, what are the functions of the SLA, Singapore Land Authority? The SLA is a statutory board under the Ministry of Law. SLA was formed on 1st June 2001 when the Land Office, Singapore Land Registry, Survey Department and Land Systems Support Units were merged. The SLA oversees the management of strata land. The SLA oversees the management of state land and buildings, land sales, leases, acquisitions and allocations, developing and marketing land-related information, and maintaining the national land information database. And since the SLA is the National Land Registration Authority, the SLA is responsible for the management and maintenance of the National Land Survey System. The third question, What kind of properties can foreigners own in Singapore? The properties that can be owned by foreigners in Singapore are: first, condominium unit; second, flat unit; third, strata landed house in an approved condominium development. A strata landed housing comprises strata titled landed housing units occupying a common development site with shared communal facilities and a single vehicular access point. Fourth, a leasehold estate in a landed residential property for a term not exceeding 7 years, including any further term which may be granted by way of an option for renewal. Fifth, shop house for commercial use. Sixth, industrial and commercial properties. Seventh, hotels registered under the provisions of the Hotels Act. Eighth, executive condominium units, HDB flat and HDB shop house. Fourth relevant question is, what kind of properties can permanent residents own in Singapore? Answer of this question is, permanent residents of Singapore can own subsidized executive condominiums. These are also called semi-private or executive condominiums. The permanent residents can acquire them 5 years after they are completely built, and similarly, foreigners can acquire them in 10 years after they are completely built. Condominiums are also known as condos in that they are residential units in a building or a complex and have common areas such as lobby and a gymnasium, etc. The main differences between an apartment building and a condominium is that an apartment may or may not be rented, but condos are bought by those people that live in them. Fifth question, are foreigners allowed to own commercial property in Singapore? Foreigners can freely own industrial and commercial real estate without any restrictions. Foreigners are allowed to run non-landed private sector housing, for instance, condominiums or any unit within a building without any prior approval, subject to the limitation that they cannot own the entirety of the apartment units in a structure without prior approval. Sixth question, who is regarded a foreign person under the Residential Property Act of Singapore? Apart from the following four classes are regarded the foreign persons: apart from a Singaporean citizen, apart from a Singaporean company, apart from a Singaporean LLP, and apart from a Singaporean society. All others are regarded foreign persons. Question 7th. How does the foreigner get approval to buy property in Singapore? In order to get approval to buy property in Singapore, in the capacity of a foreigner, an individual must fulfill two conditions. The first condition is the foreigner must be a permanent resident of Singapore for a minimum of 5 years, and they must make extraordinary economic contributions to the country. This can be determined by keeping in mind factors like income accessible for tax in Singapore. Next question, what are the kind of properties for which foreigners must seek permission? The properties that require approval before foreigners can buy them under the Residential Property Act of Singapore are: first, vacant residential land; second, semi-detached house; third, terrace house; fourth, bungalow or detached house; fifth, Strata landed house which is not within an approved condominium development under the Planning Act, such as townhouse or cluster house. Cluster house is a type of a hybrid housing scheme that is composed of homes that are identical in size, style, and space. Townhouse is a bit of a hybrid between a condo and landed property. Sixth, place of worship. Seventh, shop house, non-commercial uses. Eighth, association premises. Ninth, working dormitory or serviced apartments. These apartments are furnished, or boarding houses not registered under Hotels Act. Next question is, what is a QC? QC means a qualifying certificate. A QC or a qualifying certificate is a certificate that is required by an individual, a company, an LLP, or a society. They are either Singaporeans or foreigners. They can be either Singaporeans and foreigners. Who is a housing developer? A housing developer means someone who wants to construct residential houses and flats for sale. Certain bodies can be exempted from the requirement of this QC, qualifying certificate, due to their connection to the Singapore citizens. These bodies are: first, publicly listed housing developers; second, wholly owned subsidiaries of exempted bodies; third, wholly owned joint ventures of exempted bodies who are incorporated in Singapore; fourth, publicly listed in Singapore Exchange; sixth, chairman and majority board members are Singaporeans or major shareholders are Singaporeans. Next, who have track record in Singapore. Under the QC qualifying certificate, foreign developers have to meet two requirements. First, any property development must be completed within 5 years of the land being bought, meaning thereby the property must obtain TOP, temporary occupancy permit, within 5 years. Second, the developer must sell all the units in its project within 2 years of receiving the TOP, temporary occupancy permit. When the land is purchased, the developer has to give the Singapore government a banker's guarantee of 10% of the land price. This amount is forfeited if the developer defaults, but the developer can seek an extension of up to 3 years by paying extension charges, which are prorated based on according to the number of unsold units. Extension charges are 8% of the land purchase price for the first year, 16% for the second year, and 24% for the third year. The Singapore government imposed QC to prevent land hoarding. This is when developers buy up land but do not develop them, or does it at a snail's pace. So this is all about can foreigners buy real estate in Singapore. You must have enjoyed this video. Many thanks to you for watching this video. Please like, share and subscribe my channel. Thank you. Goodbye and good luck.